Welcome, my dumbest cat, to the stage. You can put your foot down, honey. Alright, I'm gonna let her do what she wants to do. I want to start today's video with just a moment of remembrance for Shirley System. Those of you in the DID community, I'm sure you've already heard about them passing away. The news just came out today, I found out, like half an hour ago. And of course, we didn't know them personally, but it's something that weighs heavy on our heart, knowing that we have lost somebody so bright and so unapologetic and so persistent in talking about really, really difficult things relating to trauma and the things that abuse survivors go through. We've have a candle lit for them, and I just want to encourage you to keep them in your thoughts, and their friends and family, and those who are left behind and struggling with this tremendous loss. So I wanted to say that to start out and acknowledge the impact that they had on our community. It's hard to transition from that into a media review, but this was the only script that I really had prepared, so this is what we have to go with. So it is Smidge again, coming back to review part 2 of our Moon Knight series. So today we're gonna go through episode 2, Summon the Suit.
You got a Lucy behind you.
Hi, baby.
Turn the other way.
Oh. Hi, baby. They're my backup dancers.
You have your own backup dancers.
Delicious.
And of course we have Lucy rubbing up against the tripod.
She's fine.
Is she?
In episode 2, we start right where we left off with episode 1, where Steven was working late at the museum and is chased into a public bathroom by a mythical jackal.
Lucy, you need to stop.
So
she's got a dingleberry.
That is nasty.
Nasty old lady.
I'll take care of that. Within that last scene in episode 1, we saw Mark and Steven interacting, where Mark was the one who needed to step up in front because of the situation, and he was the best person to handle that situation and ensure their survival. But we definitely saw this struggle with Steven hesitating to give up control because they don't trust each other yet. But Mark was finally able to fought off the jackal, and royally fucked up the bathroom. So now we're at the beginning of episode 2, and Steven is coming back into work that next morning. He hightails it to security and asks to see the recordings, the tapes from last night. He knows what are on those tapes, and he warns the security guard that what they are about to see is unbelievable. But the only problem is that the jackal doesn't show up on the tapes. It's just Steven running around. So of course he gets fired from his job. I mention that not because those of us with DID are often attacked by mythical creatures causing us to lose our jobs, but if that is happening to you, please call someone.
Because that's not DID.
Because that is not DID related.
Can you not?
Hey, Lucy.
Please.
Hey, baby.
Please stop.
Hey, old lady. Yeah. I bring this up because while Steven is in his boss's office, his boss hands him a pamphlet for a therapist. He mentions how he feels bad having to do this because he has noticed that Steven has been having a hard time lately. Okay. Bye-bye. Different systems have varying levels of functionality. Many systems are high functioning and are very successful in the workplace, even being able to handle high stress jobs. Some are bosses, some run their own businesses, and some are politicians. They're not always good politicians. Be on the lookout for that video. But there are just as many, if not more, systems who find it very difficult to consistently hold down a job, and this is due to losing time and memory loss and PTSD triggers and
dissociation. Just like that.
Okay, thanks. Yes, dissociation. No one with DID is weak, and it really pains me to know that systems who live in specifically capitalistic cultures are made to feel that way because our societal value is measured by their achievements in the workplace and how much they earn. But I'll get off my soapbox now and we'll continue. If you remember from episode 1, Steven found a stash of items in his flat that we now know are Mark's. And among those items was a key to a storage unit. So now Steven goes off to find the storage unit, and when he does, he finds inside a duffel bag full of guns, fake IDs, and other illegal stuff. Mark comes forward again, and we see this other interaction between Steven and Mark as Steven is having a very difficult time, again, trying to process the fact that there is this entirely different part of his life that he was very unaware of. Steven is still not really understanding everything that is happening to him and asks Mark if he is possessed by a demon. This is a very common thought amongst systems, especially those who come from a religious background, as they find it a viable explanation for what's happening to them. I also wanted to mention that Mark and Steven look exactly the same. The only difference between them is their accents. Mark has an American accent, whereas Steven has a British accent. Alters can have accents that are not native to where their body is from, and you would normally see this in what is called an overt system, where it is very outwardly apparent that there are very significant differences in personality. And that is not as common as what is called a covert system, where it's a bit more difficult to see those differences. If you have ever heard of multiplicity and me or the entropy system, they are very good examples of systems who have very different accents. And if you wanted to learn more about that, you can go check them out. Alters also very normally look different from each other in the inner world. But like we see with Mark and Steven, it is also a completely normal thing for alters to look exactly the same, even though they have other differences between them. So at the end of this conversation between Steven and Mark in the storage unit, Steven says that he wants to turn himself into the authorities because he is afraid that he is a danger to people around him. This particular sentiment is why we felt that we needed to do a deep dive into this series. This is something that a lot of systems struggle with when they first find out that they are a system, and it's because of cultural influences. I guess the biggest example of this would be Split, telling us that systems are dangerous, which is not true. Many of the depictions we have of DID...
Jeez. I agree, Split is that bad that you need to break something over it.
Ah!
Glitch.
What was that?
Oh.
She did a chirp. Oh, go stretching. Jesus Christ, dude. Sorry. Many of the depictions of DID that we have in mainstream media are incredibly harmful. And this is very, very untrue. People with DID and traumagenic disorders in general are statistically less likely to be violent to others.
Across the board.
Yeah. In fact, it is much more likely that we slip back into being the victim rather than a perpetrator. And also,
don't do this hand symbol on camera.
Oh, wait, what is this?
I think that's white supremacy.
Oh, no.
We see it as an okay, but it is not okay.
And just so we don't forget later, we also find out in this moment that Khonshu is not an alter. He actually is possessing Mark, but we're gonna get more into that later, so just hold on to that thought. After this, we meet Layla, and Layla is Mark's wife. And oh my god, I love Layla with everything in me. She is hands down my favorite character in this series.
I love her.
She's so badass. Oh! So Steven is obviously shocked with Layla showing up and being like, hey, why can you just like drop the act because we're married and you're acting like you don't know me, so this is kind of weird. But at this point, he does have a little more understanding of what's going on as she keeps calling him Mark. So we are going to get back to that, but I just wanted to lay the groundwork here as it's just the succession of events. At one point, Steven mentions the sentiment of, I want my life back. This is a sentiment that I personally struggle with a lot. Being the host of our system, it has been very difficult to let go of the feeling that I am the original person, that, you know, this life, this everything belongs to me, but that is not true. There have been two trains of thought when it comes to DID and OSDD. One being called structural dissociation and one being called the core idea. So when it comes to the idea of a system having a core, that is the belief of there is an original and all of the alters split off from this original, but it's like everything revolves around the host, that original person, which science is now debunking because of the evidence that support structural dissociation. With structural dissociation, it's the idea of there is no original because of how children's brains develop. And I'm not gonna get super into that right now. I think I'm gonna save that for a different video. But it's kind of this idea of if you had a plate and you dropped it on the floor and it's smashed into a million pieces, which piece is the original? There isn't one. It's just different pieces of the same plate. And so that is the train of thought that is more scientifically backed, and that is what makes it difficult to let go of the idea of being the original once you understand that there really is no original. And when you understand this concept, it does make it a little easier to understand the struggle that Steven is going through right now of feeling like he is not in control of his life, that he's losing parts of himself and parts of his dreams and desires and all of this to a stranger who lives in his body. When I found out that I was part of a system that is pretty much the number one thing that I wrestled with was being okay with losing time and being able to let go and let those switches happen instead of fighting it and making everything so much worse. And not only that, but not all hosts are the host for the entire life of the system. Hosts change. They can change over time, and this can happen through splits, through integration, through fusion, and even just sometimes a host just needs a break and transfers that responsibility to another alter. And that it happens a lot, even though it's not necessarily talked about a lot, but again, that is a subject for another time. This is something that we have experienced, and we have heard of other systems experiencing this. I myself am not the original host. When we were young, we had another host, and I didn't become the host until we were in college, but I didn't actually know this because a lot of those memories were transferred to me, so I would be able to effectively mask and be able to blend into being the person that everybody knew us as. And so because of that memory transfer, I was unaware that those were not things that I actually experienced. It's kind of difficult to explain to somebody who has not experienced that, because there's no real thing to compare it to. And we can see that in Steven and Mark. It is very possible that Mark was the host at one time. And later in the series, we actually do get a lot of evidence of this, because later on we do find out that as a child, they were named Mark. And so we can reasonably assess that Mark was the host as a child and into adulthood. And we see this through the evidence of him having a wife and living this entire life that Steven was unaware of. And you need a lot of time, to fit all that in. In the recent past, Steven has become the host. Okay, so moving on. Harrow tracks him down, tracks them down, and takes Steven into his little culty commune. This is where Harrow tries to get this scarab back again. When Steven refuses to give up the scarab again, Harrow sicks another jackal on them. Layla has also showed up. Okay, hold on.
You get distracted when she shows up?
A little bit. I'm gonna start this paragraph over.
I don't know why you're telling them.
I'm telling you.
You looked at them!
You're my editor, and now I'm talking to you.
Or just leave this in the video.
Layla shows up, and her and Steven are fighting to keep control of the scarab, and Harrow then sicks another jackal on them. We hear Mark's voice asking Steven to let him take control again. Steven is hesitant, but does eventually surrender after getting his ass handed to him. Steven is still afraid of giving up control, but we are starting to see that there is trust being built. I liked this interaction and this slow building of trust. I thought that was very accurate, as when you first discover that you're part of a system, your alters are not necessarily, it isn't like an immediate like we're all really close and we're like best friends. And you know, some systems don't really ever achieve that. It is like you're meeting strangers and you have to build those relationships, and there really is no guarantee that you're going to get along with everybody in your system. I think that's pretty uncommon. So after this confrontation with the jackal, Steven and Mark have another hard-hitting conversation. This conversation really hit deep. They both express the feeling of being trapped within their own mind and, again, struggling with the knowledge that they do not have control over their entire life. There is a lot of anger that is being processed as they both feel like there is somebody else hijacking their life. And they have to live with this knowledge that the other can always take control of their body and do whatever they want in it, and the other person doesn't have a say in it and doesn't even get to remember what happened. And there are two quotes that I wanted to read here that I want to focus on. Both of them are from Steven, and I'm just gonna read them here. "My whole life, I can't go on a bloody date. I can barely keep a goldfish alive. I lost my job, and it's been you. It's always been you, eating away at parts of my life like a parasite." And I had to stop at this moment and really process that because of the anger in it. And I know for myself that I struggle with feeling angry at my system members, and I imagine that if I struggle with that, I'm sure that there are plenty of you who also struggle with that. You know, the beginning of this process is incredibly difficult, and there's going to be a lot of really intense emotions, and there is going to be anger, and that is okay. And those are feelings that need to be processed. And I've heard this from a lot of people, and I've experienced this myself, of there is a great fear around anger, especially when there has been a lot of anger taken out on you in the past, and that is absolutely, you know, something that I have struggled with, as one of my abusers used so much anger against me. And one of my worst fears is turning into what hurt me. But anger is something that needs to be processed, and anger by itself is not a bad thing and can sometimes be a good thing. It's what you do when expressing that anger that defines whether that is a healthy expression or a really unhealthy expression. And the second thing he says is, yeah, well, the blood is on my hands. And he is saying that in response to Mark's life that he has been leading, and kind of this violence that he has observed. Like, on this far end of the spectrum, I did want to touch briefly on system responsibility, because what one alter does, everybody in the system is responsible for that action, for those words, whatever it is. From another example from my own life is, I have a friend who, years ago when we were in college, we suddenly just stopped talking, and she kind of distanced herself quietly from me. And it, you know, a little while later, I kind of realized, like, wow, like, how did we drift apart like that? And I later found out that there was something that I now know it was another of our system members who said something really hurtful to her. And that was what caused her to keep her distance, which is completely fair on her part. And when I found this out, I felt so horrible. And even though I was not the one who said those things, I was the one who apologized. What was expressed to her is nothing that I have ever felt towards her. And again, like, even though it was not me who expressed those things, it was me who went to go fix it. Because what one of us does is something that we are all responsible for. If the words come out of your mouth, if the actions come from you, then so should an apology. No matter who it is within your system who has started that problem, who has said those hurtful words, done those hurtful things, it is everybody's responsibility to reconcile that. And that is where we're gonna leave off for part 2. Thankfully it's a little shorter than our last one. Thank you guys so much for watching, and play nice with the other kids, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye. Look at that fluff. Look at that fluff.